The rain came down hard that Tuesday evening, turning the streets into rivers and making everything look gray and miserable. David pulled his old truck into the parking lot of his apartment building, his body aching from another 12-hour shift at the warehouse. His shoulders hurt, his back hurt, and all he wanted was to get inside, heat up some leftovers, and maybe watch a movie with his daughter before she went to bed. He was 35 years old, but some days he felt like 50. Being a single dad wasn't easy. Between the warehouse job during the week and fixing people's broken sinks and leaky roofs on weekends, he barely had time to breathe. But it was worth it. Every single exhausting day was worth it for his little girl, Sophie. She was 8 years old now, smart as a whip, and the only good thing left in his life after losing his wife 2 years ago. David grabbed his lunchbox from the passenger seat and pushed open the truck door. The rain immediately soaked his work jacket. He swore under his breath and jogged toward the building entrance, his boots splashing through puddles. That's when he saw her. A young woman was sitting on the concrete steps leading up to the apartment building. She was completely drenched, her dark hair plastered to her face, and she was shaking. Not just from the cold, David realized as he got closer. She looked scared. Really scared. He slowed down, his hand instinctively going to his phone in his pocket. You couldn't be too careful these days. But something about her made him pause. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't high or drunk. She just looked lost and terrified, like a kid who couldn't find her parents in a crowded mall. You okay? David called out over the sound of the rain. The young woman looked up at him with wide eyes. She couldn't have been more than 22 or 23. Her face was pale and there were dark circles under her eyes. She was wearing what looked like an expensive coat, but it was torn at the shoulder, and her shoes were muddy and scuffed. I don't know where to go, she said, her voice barely audible. Someone stole my purse. My phone, my wallet, everything. I don't have anywhere. David stood there for a moment, the rain beating down on both of them. Every practical part of his brain was screaming at him to just call the police, let them handle it, and go inside. He had enough problems of his own. But then he thought about his wife, Jennifer. She would never have walked past someone in trouble. She'd always been the one to help the lost dog find its owner, to give money to the homeless guy outside the grocery store, to invite the lonely neighbor over for dinner. Come on, David heard himself say. Get out of the rain. We'll figure something out. The relief on her face was immediate. She stood up quickly, wobbling a little on her feet like she'd been sitting there for a while. David led her into the building and up the 2 flights of stairs to his apartment. Water dripped from both of them, leaving a trail on the worn carpet. Listen, David said as he unlocked the door. I've got a daughter inside. She's 8, so just don't be weird, okay? We'll get you dried off and we can call someone or whatever you need. The young woman nodded quickly. Thank you. I promise I won't cause any trouble. Thank you so much. David pushed open the door. The apartment was small but clean. Sophie was sitting on the floor in front of the TV, still in her school clothes, working on some kind of art project with colored pencils spread all around her. Daddy! She jumped up and ran over to hug him, then stopped short when she saw the stranger behind him. Who's that? This is... David realized he didn't even know her name. I'm Olivia, the young woman said softly, managing a small smile. Your dad is helping me out. I got into some trouble tonight. Sophie looked at her dad with big questioning eyes. David gave her a little nod that meant it was okay. Why don't you go put on your pajamas, sweetheart? I'll heat up dinner in a minute. Sophie grabbed her art supplies and headed to her bedroom, but not before giving Olivia one more curious look. David turned to Olivia. Bathroom's down the hall. There are clean towels in the cabinet. I'll find you something dry to wear. My wife's... I still have some of her clothes. Thank you, Olivia said again, and he could hear her voice crack a little. While she was in the bathroom, David stood in his bedroom, staring at the box on the top shelf of his closet. Jennifer's clothes. He hadn't been able to get rid of them yet. Couldn't bring himself to do it. He pulled down the box and found some sweatpants and an old college sweatshirt. They'd be too big for Olivia, but at least they were dry. He knocked on the bathroom door and handed them through when she opened it a crack. Then he went to the kitchen and started heating up the leftover pasta from 2 nights ago. It wasn't much, but it was what they had. Sophie came out in her favorite pajamas with the little stars on them. Daddy, is that lady going to stay here? Just for tonight, baby. She's had a really bad day and needs help. Like when you helped Mrs. Chen fix her sink? David smiled. Yeah, something like that. Olivia emerged from the bathroom looking completely different. Without all the wet hair and ruined makeup, she looked younger. The sweatpants were rolled up at the ankles and the sweatshirt hung off her small frame. But her face had more color now and she'd stopped shaking. Feel better? David asked. Much better. Thank you. She paused. I'm sorry for just showing up like this. I know you don't know me. You have every reason not to trust me. You hungry? Was all David said. They ate at the small kitchen table, the three of them crowded around it. David had added some frozen vegetables to the pasta to make it stretch further. It wasn't fancy, but it was hot and filling. Sophie kept sneaking glances at Olivia between bites. What kind of trouble did you get into? Sophie finally asked with the blunt curiosity of an 8-year-old. Sophie, that's not polite, David said. It's okay, Olivia said. She set down her fork. I was at a place I didn't want to be and I needed to leave, so I left. But I didn't plan it very well and someone stole my bag while I was trying to figure out where to go. Were you at a bad guy's house? Sophie asked, her eyes wide. Olivia hesitated. Something like that. After dinner, David set up some blankets and a pillow on the couch. It wasn't comfortable, but it was better than sitting in the rain. Olivia kept thanking him, kept apologizing for the inconvenience until David finally had to tell her to stop. Look, it's fine. One night. Tomorrow we'll figure out how to get you home or to a friend or whatever. But tonight just rest, okay? Sophie came out to say goodnight, and to David's surprise, she walked right up to Olivia and hugged her. I hope you feel better, Sophie said. My daddy gives the best hugs when I'm sad. Maybe he can give you one too. Olivia laughed, a real laugh, and it changed her whole face. That's very sweet of you. After David tucked Sophie into bed and read her 2 chapters of their current book, he came back out to the living room. Olivia was sitting on the couch looking at the photos on the wall. There was their wedding photo, pictures of Sophie as a baby, family trips to the beach and the zoo. And there was one of Jennifer from just before she got sick, laughing at something outside the frame of the photo. Your wife? Olivia asked quietly. David nodded. Yeah, she passed away 2 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry. Me too. David sat down in the worn armchair across from her. So you want to tell me what really happened tonight? I'm not trying to pry, but if someone's after you or if you're in danger, I need to know. I've got a kid to protect. Olivia was quiet for a long moment. She pulled the sweatshirt sleeves over her hands and hugged herself. I'm not in physical danger. Not like that. I ran away from something I couldn't face. From a life I don't want. And I know that sounds dramatic and stupid, but it's true. Does your family know where you are? She shook her head. They're probably losing their minds right now. But I just needed to get away, to think, to remember what it feels like to just be a person. David didn't fully understand, but he could hear the pain in her voice. You should call them. Let them know you're safe at least. I will. Tomorrow, I promise. I just need tonight to not be who I'm supposed to be. It was a strange thing to say, but David let it go. He was too tired to push harder, and honestly, as long as she wasn't bringing trouble to his door, what did it matter? One night of giving someone shelter wasn't going to hurt anything. All right, he said, standing up. I've got to be up at 5 for work. If you need anything, just knock on my door. And don't steal anything. I don't have much, but what I have, I need. Olivia actually smiled at that. I promise I'm not a thief. You've been incredibly kind. Most people would have just walked past me. Yeah, well, David said, heading toward his bedroom. My wife used to say that kindness costs nothing, so. He shrugged, suddenly feeling awkward. Good night. Good night. And David? Thank you, really. He nodded and closed his bedroom door. As he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, he wondered what Jennifer would have thought about this. She probably would have insisted they let the girl stay longer. Made sure she had a good breakfast, maybe even tried to fix whatever problem she was running from. Jennifer had always been better at the emotional stuff than he was. Out in the living room, Olivia lay on the couch under the slightly scratchy blanket, and for the first time in weeks, she felt something close to peace. The apartment was small and old, with a leaky faucet she could hear dripping in the kitchen and a refrigerator that hummed too loud. But it felt real. It felt like a home. She thought about her own house, the massive estate with 12 bedrooms and 8 bathrooms, the staff, the grounds, the security gates. She thought about the party she'd run from, about the man her father expected her to marry. about the life that had been planned out for her since birth without anyone ever asking what she wanted. Here, in this tiny apartment with a single dad who worked too hard and a little girl who gave hugs to strangers, nobody expected anything from her. She wasn't a name or a fortune or a business opportunity. She was just a person who needed help, and someone had helped her without asking for anything in return. Olivia pulled the blanket up higher and closed her eyes. Tomorrow she would have to face reality. Tomorrow she would have to make decisions. But tonight she was just grateful to be warm and dry and safe in a place where nobody knew who she really was. In his bedroom, David set his alarm and tried to quiet his mind. He hoped he'd made the right choice. He hoped this Olivia girl really was just someone who needed help and not some kind of trouble waiting to explode. But something in his gut told him she was genuine. She had that same look Sophie sometimes got when she was trying to be brave about something that scared her. He'd give her one night of shelter and safety. Then tomorrow, she'd have to go back to wherever she came from and his life would return to normal. Just him and Sophie and the endless cycle of work and bills and trying to make it all work. He'd give her one night. One night of shelter and safety. Then tomorrow, she'd have to go back to wherever she came from and his life would return to normal. Just him and Sophie and the endless cycle of work and bills and trying to make it all work. The next morning came too fast. David's alarm went off at 5, playing the same annoying beep it had played for the past 6 years. He dragged himself out of bed and shuffled to the bathroom, careful to be quiet. The apartment was silent except for that dripping faucet he kept meaning to fix. After a quick shower, he headed to the kitchen to make coffee. That's when he found Olivia already awake, sitting at the kitchen table in the dim morning light. She'd folded the blankets neatly on the couch and was staring out the window at the dark street below. "You're up early," David said, startling her a little. "I couldn't sleep much," she admitted. "I'm not used to. I had a lot on my mind." David filled the old coffee maker with water. "Listen, about today. I've got to head to work in about an hour. There's a police station about 6 blocks from here. I can walk you there before I go and they can help you get home or contact your family or whatever you need." Olivia bit her lip. "Right, of course. I know I can't stay here." Something about the way she said it made David pause. She looked like a kid who'd just been told Christmas was canceled. But what was he supposed to do? He couldn't just let a stranger keep living on his couch. He had responsibilities. He had Sophie to think about. "It's not that I want to kick you out," David said, measuring coffee grounds, "but I don't know you. And you clearly have people looking for you. I can't get mixed up in whatever situation you're dealing with." "I understand," Olivia said quietly. "You've already done more than anyone else would have. Most people would have just called the police last night and left me in the rain." The coffee maker started gurgling and hissing, filling the kitchen with that familiar morning smell. David pulled 2 mugs from the cabinet. "They were mismatched, cheap things from the dollar store, but they worked. You want to tell me who you really are?" David asked, handing her a mug. "Because I'm pretty sure regular people don't wear $1,000 coats to go running away from home." Olivia wrapped her hands around the warm mug and stared into it. "The coat was a gift. Everything I own is a gift. Nothing really belongs to me, not in any real way." "That doesn't answer my question." She looked up at him and there was something desperate in her eyes. "If I tell you, everything changes. You'll treat me differently. You'll probably call my father immediately, and I'll be dragged back to that life before I've had a chance to think." David sat down across from her. "Look, I'm not trying to be your enemy here, but you're sitting in my kitchen wearing my dead wife's clothes, and I've got a little girl sleeping in the next room. I deserve to know what I've gotten myself into." Olivia was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached down and pulled off her watch, setting it on the table between them. Even in the dim kitchen light, David could see it was expensive. Really expensive. The kind of watch he'd seen in magazines but never in real life. "My father's name is Richard Ashford," she said finally. "He owns Ashford Properties. Maybe you've heard of it?" David felt his stomach drop. Ashford Properties. Of course he'd heard of it. They owned half the commercial real estate in the city, maybe in the state. The billboards were everywhere. He'd actually worked on one of their buildings once, fixing the plumbing in the lobby. The security alone in that place had been intimidating. "So you're telling me," David said slowly, "that you're the daughter of one of the richest men in the state, and you're sleeping on my $300 couch?" "I ran away from my engagement party," Olivia said, her voice barely above a whisper. My father arranged for me to marry Bradley Harrison. He owns Harrison Tech. It's a business merger disguised as a marriage. I don't love Bradley. I barely even like him. But my father doesn't care about that. He cares about expanding his empire. David rubbed his face with both hands. This was so far beyond his pay grade it wasn't even funny. And you thought the solution was to just run away and sit on random apartment steps in the rain? I didn't have a plan, Olivia admitted. I just knew I couldn't go through with it. I couldn't stand there in that ridiculous dress, smiling for the cameras, pretending to be excited about marrying a man who checks his stock portfolio during dinner. Despite himself, David felt a flicker of sympathy. He remembered what it felt like to be young and trapped before he met Jennifer. Before he'd found someone who actually made him happy, instead of someone who just made sense on paper. Your dad's probably got half the police force out looking for you, David said. This is bigger than just calling the local station. I know, Olivia interrupted. I know what I've done. I know the trouble I've caused. But David, last night was the first time in months that I felt like a real person instead of a chess piece being moved around a board. Sophie's bedroom door opened, and she came padding out in her star pajamas, rubbing her eyes. Daddy, why are you talking so early? Sorry, baby. Didn't mean to wake you. Sophie saw Olivia and smiled.
You're still here.
Are you staying for breakfast? David and Olivia exchanged a look. He could see the hope in the young woman's eyes, the plea for just a little more time before facing her reality. Yeah, David heard himself say. She's staying for breakfast. What was he doing? This was crazy. This was beyond crazy. But looking at Sophie's happy face and Olivia's grateful eyes, he couldn't bring himself to throw her out just yet. But we need to talk more after breakfast, David added, giving Olivia a meaningful look. And you need to contact your family today. No more putting it off. Olivia nodded. I will. I promise. David started pulling out ingredients for pancakes while Sophie chattered away about her homework and her friend at school who could do a cartwheel. Olivia listened intently, asking questions and laughing at Sophie's stories in a way that seemed genuine. As David flipped pancakes on their old griddle, he watched the two of them talking. Olivia wasn't acting like a rich girl slumming it with the poor people. She was just being herself, whoever that was underneath all the money and expectations. He thought about calling his boss and saying he'd be late. He thought about the consequences of harboring a runaway heiress. He thought about all the sensible, practical reasons to end this right now. But he also thought about Jennifer's voice in his head, telling him that sometimes the right thing and the smart thing weren't the same thing. All right, David said, sliding pancakes onto plates. Here's the deal. You can stay today, but tonight we're calling your father. I'm not getting arrested for kidnapping or whatever they could charge me with. And you're going to help Sophie with her homework while I'm at work. Really? Olivia looked shocked. You'd let me stay? One more day, David emphasized. That's it. And you're going to think real hard about what you want to say to your father when we call him. Running away is one thing, but you've got to face your problems eventually. Sophie cheered and threw her arms around her dad's waist. Thank you, Daddy. Olivia can help me with my math. David just shook his head, wondering what he'd gotten himself into. But as they sat down to eat breakfast together, the morning sun starting to come through the window, he had to admit it felt nice having someone else at the table. It felt a little less lonely. Maybe one more day wouldn't hurt. What was the worst that could happen? David left for work with a strange feeling in his gut. He'd given a complete stranger permission to stay in his apartment with his daughter. What kind of father did that? But something about Olivia seemed genuine, and Sophie had already taken a liking to her. Still, he made Olivia promise 3 times that she wouldn't leave the apartment with Sophie, wouldn't let anyone in, and would call him immediately if anything felt wrong. I've got your number memorized, Olivia had assured him. We'll be fine. I promise. The warehouse was the same as always. Loud, dusty, and filled with the smell of cardboard and diesel fuel. David spent his morning loading trucks and organizing inventory, but his mind kept drifting back to the apartment. He checked his phone every 15 minutes, half expecting to see a missed call from the police or worse, from Richard Ashford himself. But nothing came. Just a text from Olivia around 10 in the morning that said, Sophie is working on her spelling words. We made cookies. Everything is good. Cookies? David almost smiled. Their kitchen barely had the ingredients for pancakes, let alone cookies. But if it kept Sophie happy and Olivia occupied, he wasn't going to complain. Meanwhile, back at the apartment, Olivia was discovering what real life felt like. She'd woken up that morning with a sore neck from the lumpy couch and had to figure out how to work the ancient coffee maker by watching a video on David's old tablet. The whole experience was so different from her usual morning routine of having breakfast prepared by a private chef while she scrolled through her phone in a bedroom bigger than this entire apartment. After David left, Sophie had shyly asked if Olivia knew how to make chocolate chip cookies. Olivia had never made cookies in her life, but she wasn't about to admit that to an 8-year-old who was looking at her with such hopeful eyes. "Sure," Olivia had said with more confidence than she felt. "Let's see what your dad has in the kitchen." Turns out David had flour, sugar, and some very old chocolate chips in the back of the pantry. No recipe book, no stand mixer, no parchment paper. Just basic ingredients and determination. Olivia pulled up a recipe on her phone and they got to work. Sophie was a great helper, even if she did eat half the chocolate chips when she thought Olivia wasn't looking. They mixed everything in a big bowl with a wooden spoon, and Olivia's arm got tired in a way it never had during her personal training sessions. This was different. This was real work, but it was also fun. "My mom used to make cookies," Sophie said quietly as they spooned dough onto a baking sheet. "Before she got sick. She made really good ones with M&Ms in them." Olivia's heart squeezed. "Your dad told me about your mom." "I'm really sorry." Sophie shrugged in that way kids do when they're trying to be brave. "It's okay. I mean, it's not okay, but Daddy says it's okay to be sad about it. He cries sometimes at night. I can hear him, but I don't tell him because I think it makes him feel bad." Olivia had to blink back her own tears. Here was this little girl carrying such a heavy weight, and she was worried about her father's feelings. Meanwhile, Olivia had been throwing a tantrum about having to marry someone she didn't love. The perspective hit her hard. "Your dad seems like a really good person," Olivia said. "He is," Sophie agreed. "He works really hard. Sometimes he falls asleep in his work clothes because he's so tired. And he always makes sure I have what I need for school even when money is tight. He thinks I don't know about the money stuff. But I hear him on the phone sometimes talking about bills." The cookies came out slightly burnt on the bottom, but Sophie declared them the best cookies ever made. They ate 3 each, still warm from the oven, and Olivia had to admit, they tasted better than anything the family chef had ever prepared. After cookies came homework. Sophie needed help with her math, and Olivia found herself actually enjoying the challenge of explaining fractions to an 8-year-old. In her regular life, she spent her days attending charity luncheons she didn't care about, and sitting in on business meetings where her opinion was never actually wanted. This was different. This mattered to Sophie. "So if I have half a pizza and I eat a quarter of it, how much is left?" Sophie asked, chewing on her pencil. Olivia drew circles on scratch paper, dividing them into slices. "Let's draw it out. Sometimes it's easier to see it." They worked through the entire worksheet together, and when Sophie finally understood the last problem, she threw her hands up in victory. "I did it. Mrs. Patterson is going to be so surprised." "You did great," Olivia said, and she meant it. There was something deeply satisfying about helping someone learn something new, about being useful in a real, tangible way. Around lunchtime, Olivia raided the kitchen and found some bread, peanut butter, and jelly. She made sandwiches for both of them, cutting them diagonally because that's what Sophie said made them taste better. They ate on the couch and watched an animated movie that Sophie had seen a dozen times, but still laughed at all the same jokes. Olivia found herself laughing too. Not the polite laugh she used at dinner parties, but real laughter that came from her belly. When was the last time she'd actually enjoyed a movie instead of checking her phone every 5 minutes? "Can I ask you something?" Sophie said during a quiet part of the movie. "Sure." "Are you running away from bad guys?" Olivia thought about how to answer that. Not bad guys exactly. More like running away from a life that didn't feel right. Like when I didn't want to take piano lessons but Daddy made me. Kinda like that, yeah. Except bigger. Sophie nodded solemnly. "I stopped taking piano. Daddy said if I really hated it, I didn't have to do it. He said life's too short to do things that make you miserable. Maybe your daddy should think like that too." Out of the mouths of babes, Olivia thought. This 8-year-old had just summed up her entire problem in one simple statement. "Your daddy sounds very wise," Olivia said. "He is, but he also thinks my room cleans itself by magic, so maybe not that wise." Olivia laughed again. Being with Sophie felt easy and uncomplicated. There were no expectations, no hidden agendas, no business deals disguised as relationships, just a kid who wanted help with her homework and someone to watch movies with. The afternoon passed quickly. They played board games that Sophie pulled from her room, games with missing pieces that they improvised around. They drew pictures together, and Sophie insisted on drawing one of Olivia to give to her father. The picture showed a stick figure with very long hair and a big smile. "You have to sign it," Sophie said, handing her a purple crayon, "so Daddy knows it's really you." Olivia signed the picture with a flourish, feeling more relaxed than she had in months, maybe years. David got home around 6, exhausted and covered in dust from the warehouse. He opened the door to find the apartment filled with the smell of slightly burnt cookies, and Sophie and Olivia sitting on the floor playing some kind of card game with rules they'd clearly made up. "Daddy!" Sophie jumped up and ran to him. "Olivia helped me with my homework and we made cookies and I beat her at cards 3 times. David looked at Olivia, who gave him a sheepish smile. "The cookies are a little crispy, but they're edible. And she definitely did not cheat at cards. I won fair and square." Sophie protested. David couldn't help but smile. His daughter looked happier than she had in weeks. The apartment actually felt warm and lived in, not just like a place where 2 people existed side by side. "Go wash up for dinner," David told Sophie. "I'm going to order pizza." "Real pizza? Not the frozen kind?" "Real pizza. It's Friday, isn't it?" Sophie cheered and ran off to the bathroom. David turned to Olivia, his expression more serious now. "How was she today? Any problems?" "She was perfect," Olivia said honestly. "Smart, funny kind. You're raising an amazing kid." David felt a lump in his throat. He didn't get many compliments about his parenting. Most days he felt like he was barely holding it together, working too much and missing too many school events. "Thanks," he managed, "and thanks for staying with her. I know this wasn't part of your plan. Honestly, this was the best day I've had in a long time." They ordered pizza from the cheap place down the street, and the 3 of them ate at the kitchen table. Sophie told her father everything they'd done, talking so fast she barely stopped to breathe. David listened and nodded, occasionally glancing at Olivia with an expression she couldn't quite read. After dinner, Sophie begged to stay up late, but David held firm on bedtime. "School night rules, kiddo. Brush your teeth." Sophie hugged Olivia goodnight, holding on a little longer than necessary. "Will you still be here tomorrow?" Olivia looked at David. They both knew what had to happen next. "We'll see, sweetie," David said gently. "But right now, bed." After Sophie was tucked in, David and Olivia sat in the living room with the TV on mute. The moment they'd both been avoiding had arrived. "You need to call your father," David said. "I know. I mean it, Olivia. I looked you up at work. Your face is all over the news. Missing person, possible kidnapping, the whole thing. Your dad is offering a reward." "This is serious," Olivia felt sick. "I didn't mean for it to become such a big thing. I just needed some time to think." "Well, you've had a day, and now people are worried. Your father is probably losing his mind." "My father is probably more worried about the publicity than about me," Olivia said bitterly. "Everything's always about appearance with him. About the company. About the legacy." David sighed. "Maybe that's true, but you won't know until you talk to him, and honestly, I can't keep harboring you here. I've got Sophie to think about. If someone finds out you're here and I didn't report it, I could lose custody. I could go to jail." The reality of what she'd asked him to do hit Olivia hard. In her desperation to escape, she'd put this kind man and his daughter at risk. "What kind of person did that?" "You're right," she said quietly. "I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking about the consequences for you. I was just thinking about myself." "Call him," David said, handing her his phone. "Tell him you're safe. Tell him you need to talk. But call him." Olivia took the phone with shaking hands. She dialed the number she'd known by heart since she was old enough to use a phone. It rang once. "Hello?" Her father's voice was sharp, strained in a way she'd rarely heard. "Dad, it's me." There was a moment of complete silence. Then, "Olivia? Olivia, where are you? Are you hurt? I'm fine. I'm safe. I'm with someone who helped me." "Who? Where?" "I'm sending security right now." "Stay where you are." "No," Olivia said quickly. "No security, not yet. I need to talk to you first. I need you to listen to me." "Listen to you?" "Olivia, you disappeared from your own engagement party. Do you have any idea what you've put everyone through? Bradley's family is furious. The media is having a field day, and I've had every police department in the state looking for you. I know, and I'm sorry for worrying you. But Dad, I can't marry Bradley. I don't love him. I don't even like him. And I know you think this is what's best for the company, but it's my life. It's my life, and I should get to choose. This is ridiculous. You're being a child. Marriage isn't about love, it's about partnership, about building something together. Like you and Mom. The words came out harsher than Olivia intended. Another silence. Her parents' marriage had been exactly what her father was describing. A business arrangement that looked perfect on paper and felt empty in reality. They'd divorced when Olivia was 15, and her mother had moved to Paris and remarried a painter she'd met in a cafe. She'd never seemed happier. That's different, her father said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. It's not different. I don't want to wake up in 20 years and realize I've lived someone else's life. I want to make my own choices, even if they're mistakes. Especially if they're mistakes. David watched Olivia talk to her father, saw the tears streaming down her face, saw her knuckles white as she gripped the phone. He felt like he was intruding on something private, but he couldn't leave. This was his phone, his apartment. He was involved now whether he wanted to be or not. Just tell me where you are, her father said. We'll talk about this face to face. Olivia looked at David, who nodded. I'll text you the address, Olivia said. But Dad? Come alone. No security team, no assistants, no lawyers, just you. If I see anyone else, I'm gone again, and next time you won't find me. Olivia, promise me. A long pause. Fine, I promise. Send me the address. Olivia hung up and handed the phone back to David. Her hands were still shaking. He's coming. Probably within the hour, knowing him. You did the right thing, David said, did I? Because it doesn't feel right. It feels like I'm about to be dragged back into a cage. Then tell him that. You're an adult. He can't force you to marry someone. You don't know my father. When he wants something, he usually gets it. David stood up and headed to the kitchen. He came back with 2 glasses of water and handed one to Olivia. Look, I don't know your dad and I don't know your life. But I do know that you can't run away forever. Eventually you have to face things. Olivia sipped the water. How do you do it? Stay strong when everything feels impossible. David thought about the last 2 years. The grief, the bills, the late nights worrying about Sophie, the constant feeling that he was barely keeping his head above water. I don't always feel strong, he admitted. Most days I feel like I'm faking it. But I've got Sophie counting on me, so I don't have a choice. I get up every morning and do what needs to be done because someone needs me to. Must be nice having something that clear, Olivia said. Having a purpose that obvious. You'll find your purpose. But first, you've got to have the hard conversations, starting with the one that's about to walk through that door. They sat in silence, waiting. Outside, the city hummed with its usual Friday night energy. People heading to bars, to restaurants, to movies. Normal people living normal lives. David wondered what it was like to have so much money that you never had to worry about bills or groceries, or whether you could afford new shoes for your kid. But then he looked at Olivia, this girl who had everything money could buy and none of the freedom that mattered, and he thought maybe he wasn't the one who should be feeling envious. 20 minutes later, headlights swept across the window. Not just one car, but 3. David's heart sank. You said alone, Olivia said, her voice tight. Maybe he's just being careful, David offered, but he didn't believe it. There was a heavy knock on the door. David opened it to find himself face to face with 3 men in dark suits, and behind them, a man in an expensive coat who could only be Richard Ashford. The reckoning had arrived. Richard Ashford was not a tall man, but he had the kind of presence that made him seem bigger than he was. Everything about him screamed money and power, from his perfectly tailored suit to the watch on his wrist that probably cost more than David's truck. His face was hard, the kind of face that came from years of making difficult decisions and expecting people to fall in line. The 3 security guards fanned out slightly, like they were expecting trouble. David felt his protective instincts kick in. This was his home, his space, and he didn't care how rich this guy was. You promised to come alone, Olivia said from behind David. Her voice steady but cold. Richard's eyes found his daughter, and for just a second, David saw something flicker across his face. Relief maybe, or fear, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. I promised no such thing, Richard said. I said I'd come. I never agreed to come without protection. For all I knew, you'd been kidnapped. I called you. I told you I was fine. You disappeared from your engagement party and spent 2 days God knows where. Forgive me for not taking chances, David cleared his throat. Look, I don't want any trouble. Your daughter showed up here in the rain, scared and alone. I gave her a place to sleep. That's it. She's safe, she's fine, and now you're here to take her home. So can we keep this civil? Richard's eyes shifted to David, really seeing him for the first time. David could practically see the man's brain working, sizing him up, categorizing him. Working class. Single father. Nobody important, and you are? Richard asked. David Miller. I live here with my daughter. David's been very kind, Olivia interjected. He didn't have to help me, but he did. So please don't treat him like he's done something wrong. Richard stepped into the apartment without being invited, and his security team followed. David wanted to protest, but what was he going to do? Fight 3 trained guards and a billionaire? He stepped aside and let them in, feeling like his small home had just been invaded. Richard looked around the apartment with barely concealed disdain. David saw his space through this man's eyes, the worn furniture, the patched wall where Sophie had once thrown a toy too hard, the outdated appliances, the general shabbiness that came from not having enough money to fix everything that needed fixing. This is where you've been staying? Richard asked his daughter. Yes. On that couch? Yes. Richard shook his head slowly. Olivia, what were you thinking? Running away to this? David felt his jaw tighten. Hey, it might not be a mansion, but it's clean and it's safe. Your daughter was welcome here. Richard ignored him completely, keeping his focus on Olivia. Get your things. We're leaving. Bradley's family is willing to overlook this incident if we move quickly. We can reschedule the engagement party for next month. No, Olivia said simply. Excuse me? I said no. I'm not marrying Bradley. I'm not rescheduling anything. I'm done. Richard's face darkened. Olivia, don't be childish. You made a commitment. You made a commitment. I never agreed to any of this. You decided that marrying me off to Bradley Harrison was good for business. And you expected me to just go along with it like always. This is hardly the place for this discussion, Richard said, glancing at David and then toward Sophie's bedroom door. Why? Because someone might actually tell you the truth for once? Olivia's voice was rising. Because someone might point out that you've spent my entire life making decisions for me without asking what I want. David stepped forward. Listen, maybe you should both sit down and talk this through. Getting angry isn't going to help anything. Stay out of this, Richard snapped. This is a family matter. It's happening in my living room, so I'm kind of already in it, David shot back. And you know what? Your daughter's right. You can't force her to marry someone. This isn't the Middle Ages. Richard turned on David with surprising intensity. You have no idea what you're talking about. You know nothing about our world, about the responsibilities that come with the kind of wealth and position we have. These decisions aren't made lightly. Maybe that's the problem, David said. You're so worried about wealth and position that you forgot about the actual person involved. One of the security guards stepped forward, but Richard held up a hand to stop him. For a long moment, Richard just stared at David. Then he laughed, but it wasn't a friendly sound. Let me guess, Richard said. You're one of those people who thinks money doesn't matter. That love conquers all, that we should all just follow our hearts and everything will work out. I think people should have the right to make their own choices. David replied evenly. Rich or poor doesn't matter. And I think a father should listen to his daughter when she says she's unhappy. What do you know about being a father? Richard demanded. You live in this. He gestured around dismissively. This place. Working what, some manual labor job? Barely making ends meet? You think that's what I want for my daughter? Dad, stop it, Olivia said. But Richard was on a roll now. She's been here 2 days and you've probably got her convinced that poverty is noble, or some nonsense like that. But let me tell you something, Mr. Miller. Being poor isn't romantic. It's hard and stressful and limiting. I built my fortune from nothing, so that my daughter would never have to struggle. And I'm not going to stand by while some stranger fills her head with fairy tales. David felt his anger rising, but he forced himself to stay calm. Losing his temper wouldn't help anything. You're right. Being poor is hard. It's stressful. I work 12-hour days and still worry about making rent. But you know what I have that you apparently don't? A kid who knows she's loved for who she is, not for what she can do for my business plans. That hit home. David could see it in the way Richard's expression tightened. How dare you, Richard said quietly. How dare I what? Tell you something you don't want to hear? Your daughter ran away from her own engagement party. She was sitting on my steps in the rain, terrified. You think that's normal? You think that's the sign of a happy person? Sophie's bedroom door opened and she peeked out in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. Daddy, why is everyone yelling? The room went silent. David immediately went to his daughter, kneeling down to her level. It's okay, baby. Go back to bed. Everything's fine. But Sophie was looking at Olivia with worried eyes. Are they taking you away? Olivia's face crumpled. She walked over and knelt down beside Sophie. Hey, remember what we talked about today? About how sometimes we have to do things even when they're scary? Sophie nodded, her lower lip trembling. Well, I have to have a hard talk with my dad now, but thank you for being my friend today. You helped me more than you know. Sophie threw her arms around Olivia's neck. I don't want you to go. I know, sweetheart. But your dad's right here and he loves you so much. You're lucky to have him. David felt his throat tighten as he watched them. Richard was watching too, and something had shifted in his expression. He was seeing his daughter with this little girl, seeing her genuinely care about someone, seeing her be kind and gentle in a way he maybe hadn't seen in a long time. David picked up Sophie and carried her back to bed, tucking her in tight. It's going to be okay, he whispered. Sleep now. When he came back out, the atmosphere had changed. Richard was sitting on the couch now, looking suddenly older and more tired. The security guards had backed off slightly, no longer looking quite so aggressive. She's a sweet kid, Richard said quietly. Your daughter? Yeah, she is. How long has it been? Since your wife? David was surprised by the question. 2 years cancer. Richard nodded slowly. I'm sorry. That must have been difficult. It is. But we manage. And you work where? Riverside Warehouse. I'm a supervisor there. Do some handyman work on weekends to make extra money. Richard looked around the apartment again, but this time his expression was different. Less judgmental, more thoughtful. And you invited a complete stranger into your home. Let her stay with your daughter. Why? David shrugged. My wife used to say that we're all just walking each other home, that we should help when we can. So I did, even though you had no idea who she was, even though she could have been dangerous. She wasn't dangerous. She was scared and alone. And yeah, maybe it was stupid. Maybe I should have just called the cops, but I didn't. Olivia spoke up from where she was standing by the window. David gave me something I haven't had in years, Dad. He gave me a day of being normal, of feeling like a real person instead of a chess piece in someone else's game. He didn't want anything from me. He didn't care about my money or my connections. He just saw someone who needed help. Richard was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Tell me about yesterday. What did you do? So Olivia told him. About making burnt cookies with Sophie. About helping with homework, about watching movies and playing games with missing pieces, about feeling useful and needed and normal. As she talked, her whole face lit up in a way that made her look younger, happier. And this morning, Olivia continued, Sophie told me that life's too short to do things that make you miserable. An 8-year-old figured out something I've been too scared to admit for years. Richard looked at his daughter for a long moment. You really don't want to marry Bradley? I really don't, Dad. I don't love him. I don't even respect him. He treats waiters badly and checks his phone during conversations and talks about women like they're accessories. I can't spend my life with someone like that. The merger would have been good for both companies. Then merge the companies without marrying me off. You're a brilliant businessman. You'll figure it out. And what do you want? Richard asked. If not this, then what? What's your plan? Olivia hesitated. I don't know yet. And that terrifies me. But I know I want to figure it out for myself. I want to go to school and study something I actually care about. I want to work, real work, not just showing up to charity events with my name on them. I want to make decisions and make mistakes and live my own life. You could have everything, Richard said. Why would you want to struggle? Because having everything means nothing if none of it's really mine. David has less money in his bank account than I spend on a pair of shoes, but he's rich in ways that matter. His daughter loves him. He does work, that means something. He makes a difference in people's lives. David felt uncomfortable being held up as some kind of example. Look, I'm just trying to get by like everyone else. Don't make me into something I'm not. But you are something, Olivia insisted. You're proof that there's a different way to live. That kindness and character matter more than net worth. Richard stood up slowly and walked to the window. He looked out at the street below, at the normal neighborhood with its normal people living their normal lives. Lives he'd probably never thought much about. "Your mother said something to me once," Richard finally spoke, "right before we divorced. She said I'd built an empire but lost my soul in the process. I told her she was being dramatic. But maybe she wasn't." Olivia walked over to her father. "Dad, I don't want to hurt you, and I'm grateful for everything you've given me, but I need to find out who I am without all of this." Richard turned to face his daughter, really face her, maybe for the first time in years. "You're right," he said quietly. "I haven't been listening. I've been so focused on building the business, on securing the future, that I forgot to think about whether you wanted the future I was building. So you'll call off the engagement?" Richard sighed deeply. "I'll call off the engagement. Bradley's father won't be happy, but I'll deal with it. We'll find another way to structure the merger, or we won't merge at all." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "Really, you mean it?" "Really, but Olivia, you have to meet me halfway. You can't just run away every time things get difficult. We need to communicate better. Both of us. I know I will. I promise." Father and daughter hugged, and David looked away, feeling like he was intruding on a private moment. One of the security guards cleared his throat awkwardly. When they pulled apart, Richard turned to David. "Mr. Miller, I owe you an apology. I came in here ready to see you as a threat or a manipulator, and you're neither. You're just a good man who helped my daughter when she needed it." "It's fine," David said. "I get it. You were worried about her. Still, I was rude about your home and your life, and that wasn't fair. You're doing right by your daughter, and that's what matters." "Thanks." Richard pulled out his wallet, and David's stomach dropped. "Please don't," David said quickly. "Don't what?" "Don't try to pay me. I didn't help your daughter for money. I just did what anyone should do." Richard paused, then slowly put his wallet away. He looked at David with something like respect. "You're an unusual man, Mr. Miller. I'm really not. I just try to do the right thing when I can." Olivia went to the bathroom to collect her things, and Richard found himself alone with David for a moment. The security guards had stepped out into the hallway. "Can I ask you something?" Richard said. "Sure. How do you do it? Raise a child alone, work as hard as you do, and still manage to be decent?" David thought about that. "I don't know that I'm particularly decent. Most days I feel like I'm barely holding it together, but I love my kid. And I want her to grow up knowing that there's more to life than just getting by. I want her to be kind and generous and thoughtful. So I try to model that even when it's hard." Richard nodded slowly. "I think I forgot how to do that somewhere along the way. Model the right things. It's never too late to start again." Olivia came back out, and it was time to go. She hugged David briefly.